Come here. Come here, Evan. I'll give you love. Come here. Leo, come here. Come here. Yeah, she's neglecting you. So awful. Come on, get up here. Is she neglecting you?
If your roommate's around, can you wish her happy Veterans Day from us?
Yes, I will. Mom, happy Veterans Day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I thought it was yesterday, and I kept thinking, how did I miss it? Jen, happy Veterans Day. You're kind of a veteran yourself.
Thank you.
Let's say you're not kind of one. Is when you're a veteran when you've served it all, right?
Yeah, I'm still in.
I know you are.
I got a while yet.
You plan on doing it full time? Staying
No, I just 20 years. I don't think I'll go full time, but I want 20 years in.
Okay. You guys bear with me just for a second here because I've been trying over the last day. Our next chapter that we cover in lecture is the sense organs, the special senses. And I've been trying, I have been using another professor's PowerPoints to give me an idea as to what you need to know for your next set of classes. And I try to use that as my guide for what to do during lecture. And she doesn't have, I don't have anything for special senses from her. So I've been trying to contact her. And yesterday she contacted me back and told me that she just didn't have anything for it. And I think it's important to cover it all the same. But if you looked at the chapter is 60 pages long. And we have one day set aside for it. And I may, depending on what she tells me, I may have to just pick and choose because there's no way to cover that in 60 days. Okay, so she hasn't responded yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do chapter 11 first. We've talked a lot about neuromuscular junctions. Jen, it probably will work. I know what you're referring to, and it'll work. I think so. What I want to do chapter 11 first, next week after we finish the autonomic nervous system. I'm going to do chapter 11 first and then come back and do the special senses. And whatever we don't get to by the end of the semester, we don't get to. And that will help me understand just how much I need to cover. Because I think the muscle tissue is more important overall. And just time-wise, I can determine from the special senses what we should cover and what we shouldn't. So understand that when we finish chapter 15, the autonomic nervous system, we're going to do the special senses next. I may change the labs around too for that reason. Just be patient with me and I will send out an email about all these other changes. This has just been a change that I've realized in the last 2 or 3 days that I didn't have what I normally have to use to develop for class. And so just be patient with me as I maybe make some changes to our schedule. So plan on, let me say this one more time. Plan on, we're going to cover chapter, as soon as we're done with the autonomic nervous system, which is chapter 15, we're going to do chapter 11 rather than chapter 16. And then we will come back and whatever we have time for at the end, we will do of chapter 16. And we have a lab that's going to cover part of chapter 16 too. It's going to cover vision. So chapter 11, so we're going to do chapter 15, the autonomic nervous system, which we started the other day. We're going to do chapter 11 next. And we're going to do chapter 16 last.
Are we having another exam besides the very final one?
Yes, we do. And it'll probably cover I need to remember how it's supposed to work. Bear with me. Let me look at the syllabus just for a second here. What I try to do is I try to develop my lecture first, and then I go in and I pick the questions for the exam from that. Bear with me just for a second here. So yes, we have another one before we're going, after we finish, we're going to have one more. I will tell you the comprehensive exams are sometimes the easier exams.
It is comprehensive exam. Is that on the lab? Is that on? Sorry. Is that on the lab? Like like the other labs are, or like the other lab quests are? Is that on the same thing? Is that on Connect?
It's going to be on Connect, yes. And what I would let me say things that we've gone over like consistently all semester. For example, negative feedback loops. We've gone over all semester long. Negative feedback loops. The synapse that we've talked about for at least the last 4 or 5 chapters, over and over again. Those are things that you should expect to be on the final. And from what I've been told, my comprehensive final exams are easier than all the other exams. Because I'm going to selectively go after questions that we've talked about all semester long. Another question that you can assume will be on there is something probably to do with acetylcholine, because we're talking about it a lot in this chapter. We've talked about it as a neurotransmitter before. Things that we've hit on chapter after chapter after chapter. Plan on it being on there. Let's say not chapter after chapter. Let's say if I brought up the same thing twice in 2 different chapters and asked you, do you remember this? What was this? That will probably be on there because I like it to be something that it's going to cover the whole semester, but it's going to cover overall themes. What's the definition of homeostasis? The definition of homeostasis is keeping things within narrow limits. The idea that we keep things within a narrow physiological, normal physiological range. What's a negative feedback loop? What's a positive feedback loop? What's the difference between the two? Let's see, what else would be on there? When I have it completely designed, I'll tell you more about it. But things that we overriding things like especially feedback loops are going to be in there because we talk about them. They're an overall theme to physiology. We always have feedback loops. Let's see, what else? Yeah, be patient with me. I haven't thought through it a lot, but I've been told by other students in the past that they're usually the easiest exams that I give. Because they are, I go specifically, I'm not going after specific examples, I'm trying to go over overall themes. Let's, what else? So plan on doing chapter 11 next. That professor maybe didn't respond to me this morning. I know she's a morning person. And she maybe has not responded to me yet because she's trying to think of giving me a list of topics in the sense organs chapter as to what we can cover. Because if you look at your book, the autonomic nervous system is about a 20-page chapter. The special organs, the sense organs, is about a 60-page chapter. There's a lot of information there. And I don't believe we're going to cover all of it within 3 hours. There's really no way to do that. And so I've emailed her and asked her to let me know what specific things are more important than others for any of your future classes. And she hasn't responded back since yesterday afternoon when I emailed her again last night. So be patient with me, but plan on doing chapter 11 first. So not chapter 16, chapter 11. We're going to finish the autonomic nervous system next Monday. I will get exam 2 out there. Actually, I should put it together. We already have it out, don't we? Do you have exam 2? Yeah, you've had it already out. So exam 3 is going to cover the autonomic nervous system, the sense organs, and the muscular tissue. The final, which I still think you're going to find is the easiest exam of all of them.
So we're not doing chapter 14?
No, wait, we've already done chapter 14. You remember talking about the cranial nerves?
Yeah, I didn't think it was on. Okay, I didn't recall it on the last exam. I guess I just did the things.
Did it, was it not on there?
No, I think the last one was 7, 12, and 13.
Seriously, okay, so I messed it up. Let's plan on the sense organs being on the final. All right, let me, I will send out an email, but plan on the sense organs being on the final. And the rest of it comprehensive. Yeah, I think you're right. Shoot, how did I screw that up? I don't know. But plan on the sense organs being on the final. So exam 3 is going to cover chapter 14, 15, and chapter 11. The final is going to be chapter 16 and the comprehensive exam. And the rest comprehensive. And yes, it'll be on Connect. Overall, I've been looking at, I study out the exam scores fairly. I spend a lot of time looking at your exam scores because it tells me, am I designing the exams right, or if they're too hard or if they're too easy, or usually I'm more worried if they're too hard. And I think the exam 2 is actually a fairly good one. I think exam 1 there was more, it was a lot more information. It was a harder exam, and I don't think I designed it as well as exam 2. So let me tell you that I spend a lot of time evaluating there. So Lab Quest 4 is out right now. Exam 2 is out right now. I will get, as soon as we finish chapter 11, remember we're switching these around. We're going to finish chapter 11, and I will put exam 3 out. I need to find out for me, and I know they've sent me an email, when my final grades are due. And that will tell me when I need this back, when I need you to have the final done. I will definitely be sending out an email, and I'll give you all this information as we're coming down to the end of the semester. I am going to put out another case study. I'm going to give me the weekend to do that because I'm going to be writing it up. And it will more than likely, I could probably pick some of the special senses because if you remember, it's going to cover the brain and the cranial nerves and the sense organs. And you don't have to have had a chapter on the sense organs to understand what cranial nerves are involved in what senses. Because we covered that when we talked about the cranial nerves. So it will have to do with the cranial nerves and overall senses. I will be writing it up, so I'm not pulling it offline like I have the last two. I may try to pull some of it offline because that will give me an idea. But a lot of students are worried about the final covering 200 points instead of 150 because that means it carries a lot more weight. And I don't want you to worry about that. I prefer to do it the way I should have done it from the beginning. Questions or thoughts? If you go and look, if you're wondering about how to bring up your grade, make sure that you've gotten all the smart book assignments done. Make sure you've got all the lab quests done. If you're missing one or two, or if you're missing several, I reach out to you. If you're only missing one or two, I'm probably not going to reach out to you. But if you want to know how to bring up your grade, that's the way to do it. You have the 10-point extra credit, which you still can do. But outside of that, make sure you have all the assignments done. Make sure that you've got all the exams done. If you're significantly behind, make sure you've got all the exams done, and I can always extend out dates. Make sure you've got all the exams done. Make sure you've got all the lab quests done. Make sure the case studies are done because those are the ones that carry the most amount of points. And I need to dedicate some time this weekend to grading your case studies, so bear with me as I get it done. Yeah, I honestly, looking at this, so we're doing the brain and cranial nerves this week. The next 3 labs are all muscles. I thought there was a vision something for the special senses. I think we're going to do it last, because if we're going to be doing this next week, well, no, we're not going to, we're just, never mind. I'm going to quit talking. But plan on doing chapter 11 next week after we finish chapter 15. And I will work also to get exam 3 done. Okay, never mind. I'm going to quit talking because all I'm doing is confusing my head. So what protects the brain? You guys, what protects the brain?
Meninges?
The meninges in the skull, correct?
Skull, yeah.
Okay, so that, I think that's what this first video is about. So before I start this, what do you need for lab today? You have the worksheets, the videos, and there's a PowerPoint. No Connect activities.
The brain is the best protected organ in the body. It has multiple layers of protected organ. The first layer consists of the bones of the skull, which act as armor, shielding the brain from damaging blows to the head. If we remove the skull, here you see the brain lying within the cranial cavity. The next layer of protection.
Stop. Let's do something a little differently here. Get rid of some of these windows. So if you didn't hear before, we are doing chapter 11 next. We'll do chapters, so we're going to finish the autonomic nervous system. We're going to do chapter 11 next, and then we will come back and do chapter 16. And I think it's actually, looking at the lab schedule, I think it's a better idea all the same.
The brain is the best protected organ in the body. It has multiple.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Give me 1 second here.
The brain is the best protected organ in the body. It has multiple layers of protection. The first layer consists of the bones of the skull,
Okay.
which act as armor, shielding the brain from damaging blows to the head. If we remove the skull, here you see the brain lying within the cranial cavity. The next layer of protection is the meninges. They are not shown on this model, but they are comprised of 3 membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord, and they keep them from being damaged by contact with the inside of the skull. The very outer meninx is called the dura mater. It is called the tough mother. Then there is a meninx that is deeper than the dura mater. It is called the arachnoid mater. The final meninx or deepest meninx is called the pia mater, and it tightly adheres to the brain itself. The final layer of protection is the cerebrospinal fluid that the brain and the spinal cord basically float in. The cerebrospinal fluid circulates throughout the ventricular system of the brain and within the subarachnoid space. That is the space between the pia mater and the arachnoid mater.
So I think we probably already knew that the skull and the meninges protect the brain.
If we look at the surface of the brain, we can see many folds or bumps. These folds or bumps or ridges are called gyri. A single fold or ridge is called a gyrus. We can also see many shallow grooves or indentations. These are called sulci. A single groove is called a sulcus. Folding of the cerebral cortex during embryonic development creates the gyri and the sulci that you see here. These gyri and sulci separate the brain regions and increase the brain surface area for cognitive ability.
So that's the surface of your brain is what contains all of the synapses. And when we think about that, the synapses are the communication from one neuron to another neuron, correct? How one communicates with another. So the more surface area the brain has, the more cognitive ability and more neural integration it's capable of.
Let's look at the lobes of the brain. The most anterior lobe is the frontal lobe. It is protected by the frontal bone of the skull. The frontal lobe is the part of the brain that controls important cognitive skills like emotional expression, problem solving, memory, language, judgment and reasoning, and even sexual behaviors. In essence, it is the control panel of our personality. It is separated from this more posterior lobe called the parietal lobe. This separation involves a small indentation or groove in the brain that is referred to as the central sulcus, So this shallow indentation separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. The ridge sitting anterior to the central sulcus is called the precentral gyrus. This is our primary motor cortex, so it is involved in motor function, and basically nerve impulses are generated here that control the voluntary movement of skeletal muscles. So this is called the precentral gyrus. Sitting posterior to the central sulcus is another important ridge, and this ridge is called the postcentral gyrus. It contains our primary somatosensory cortex. So basically, it's responsible for processing sensations that arise from receptors positioned throughout the body that detect things like touch, pain, temperature changes, and even what we call proprioception. This is our position of our body in space. The parietal lobe, again, which sits behind this central sulcus, is protected by a bone of the skull called the parietal bone. And the parietal lobe plays an important role in integrating sensory information from various parts of the body and then processing information relating to the sense of touch. It even plays a role in our knowledge of numbers and their relations. There is another smaller indentation that we see here, and this is called the parieto-occipital sulcus. And basically, this sulcus separates the parietal lobe.
Guys, what's the back lobe called? What's this lobe called?
I can't say occipital, whatever.
Yes, that's right.
Occipital.
Occipital lobe, yes.
Good try, Jen.
So what's this one right here?
Temporal.
Okay,
Cerebellum.
what's this one right here?
Parietal.
What's this one right here?
Frontal.
Yeah.
From the most.
What's this fissure called right here, this sulcus?
Is it central?
What's this sulcus called right here?
Mhm. Is that the post-central?
This is the postcentral right here. What's this one? It's on the lateral side.
Lateral sulcus.
Yes.
Posterior lobe called the occipital lobe. The occipital lobe is important because it contains the primary visual cortex. So basically, it receives sensory impulses from our retina, which is stimulated by light, and then this area processes those incoming signals to produce visual images, which allows us to discern objects, shapes, colors, etc. The next important indentation is what we call the lateral sulcus. The lateral sulcus. And this indentation separates the parietal and frontal lobes from the temporal lobe. Here's the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe would be protected by the temporal bone. Just like the occipital bone protects the occipital lobe, the temporal bone protects the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is important because it contains primary auditory cortex. So basically, this part of the brain receives signals from our cochlea and inner ear to perceive sound. So when we hear a sound, we don't even have to even be able to see what's going on. We can hear a sound and then associate it with our memory and be able to discern what is making that particular sound. There is also another lobe that is not shown on this model.
What's that other lobe called that she's going to talk about next? Talked about how it doesn't follow the pattern of being named by the bones that overlie it. What is that? What is it called that's deep within?
The limbic?
Isola, something like that.
Limbic, it's near it. The limbic is deep. Yeah, Layla was right. It's the limbic is a deep system in there, and so it's located in that same general area. I'm guessing that the insula maybe lays on top of it, or even around it a little bit. But it's the insula. So you're right with regards to the limbic system too. That I think, if I remember right, one of the major functions of the insula is also emotion.
It lies deep to the temporal lobe and it is called the insula. But all together, these lobes, the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe make up the largest portion of the brain called the cerebrum. This deep groove is called the longitudinal fissure. It separates the right cerebral hemisphere from the left cerebral hemisphere. The dura mater, which is the very outer meninx of the three meninges, actually dips or descends down into this deep groove.
You guys, you could plan on the meninges being on the final too. Questions about the meninges, because we've talked about them in two different chapters, the spinal cord and nerves, and this one, and the brain and cranial nerves. So that would be a really good question too. Some good questions.
Our dural
Should make a
sinuses,
list
which are
of those.
basically veins that run through this area down in between the cerebral hemispheres, and they need to be protected. So they are protected by a double fold of the dura mater that descends down into this longitudinal fissure. It has a sickle shape, and it is called the falx cerebri. On the posterior side,
What makes up the falx cerebri? I think she may have just said it here, but what was she saying is makes up the falx cerebri? Makes up the falx cerebri.
Is it dura mater?
It is. Good job. Yes, it is. What makes the meninges in the brain different from the meninges, especially with regards to the dura mater? What makes it different in the brain versus in the spinal cord?
The spinal cord is only composed of a single layer. The brain is too.
Exactly. And so in between the two layers of the dura mater, that's the false, those two layers, that is the falx cerebri, which makes up that between those two layers is the superior sagittal sinus, which is a major sinus for blood accumulation that's going to return to the heart. and she might
Blood?
blood accumulation that's going to return back to the heart. She may show a picture of it. Let's just see. And if she doesn't, we'll talk more about it. If we don't see it in the PowerPoint, I'll readdress it again.
Of the brain. There is another prominent fissure, and this is called the transverse fissure. This is called the transverse fissure. And basically, it separates the occipital lobes of the cerebrum from the cerebellum. You can see that the cerebellum also consists of two parts. So here we have the right cerebellar hemisphere and we have the left cerebellar hemisphere. And so again, another double fold of the dura mater dips down into this groove called the transverse fissure. So basically, the dura mater is acting as a septum or a divider that is separating these occipital lobes from the cerebellum. When the dura mater dips down into this transverse fissure, it is then called the tentorium cerebelli. This provides a strong membranous roof over the cerebellum, and you can kind of see that it basically forms kind of a tent over.
With regards to cancers, remember how that tentorium cerebelli is a good, they use it as a plane of reference with regards to where brain tumors are located. Do you remember which ones are more common in children, whether they're below or above that tentorium cerebelli? It was just one slide, so let me just tell you. Brain tumors in children tend to be below the infratentorial, meaning they're below the tentorium cerebelli. Adult tumors tend to be supratentorial, meaning they're above the tentorium cerebelli.
Cerebellum. There is one more place where the dura mater actually dips in between these structures of the brain, and that is between the right cerebellar hemisphere and the left cerebellar hemisphere. So there's another double fold of this dura mater, and this is called the falx cerebelli. The falx cerebelli. So the falx cerebri dips down in between the right cerebral hemisphere and the left cerebral hemisphere. The tentorium cerebelli is where the dura mater dips down into this transverse fissure between the occipital lobes of the cerebrum and the cerebellum. And the falx cerebelli is where the dura mater dips down in between the right and left cerebellar hemispheres. Here you can see I have removed part of the cerebrum so that you can see deeper inside the brain. And the brain consists of two kinds of matter. These are gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is represented by this pink color.
With regards to the locations of the gray and the white matter, how do they differ between that in the brain and that in the spinal cord?
It's opposite actually. Gray matter inside in the spine.
Yes. So the gray matter in the spine is on the inside. In the brain, it's on the outside.
Outside.
here on the very outer surface of the cerebrum. This is called the cerebral cortex. And the gray matter is mainly found in the cerebral cortex and then in the various nuclei of the brain. The gray matter contains many cell bodies of neurons, and so therefore it lacks myelin, since the dendrites and cell bodies of neurons are not myelinated. And so that is what accounts for the color difference.
So the gray matter in the spinal cord, the gray matter in the brain, they're composed of the same things. The white matter is what makes, the reason it looks white is because of the myelin. What do we have that's really important to be myelinated? Axons. So the white matter in the spinal cord and the white matter in the brain are composed of the same things when it comes generally axon nerve fibers. The gray matter in the spinal cord is cell bodies, synapses. In the gray matter in the brain is the same thing. The white matter in the brain are neuronal tracts, axons, nerve bundle fibers. The white matter in the spinal cord is the same thing. Nerve fibers, nerve bundles, tracts. One thing I like about these videos, they may sound kind of long and monotonous, but it's a really good review of what we've been talking about in lecture. In a not such a long process as I feel like lecture sometimes is.
Between the white matter and the gray matter. The white matter lies deep to the cerebral cortex. It contains relatively few cell bodies and chiefly consists of long myelinated axons. So basically, you can think of white matter as a transmission tissue for transmitting nerve impulses.
What's this right here?
Ventricles.
It's what?
Ventricle.
You're right, it's the ventricle, it's the lateral ventricle.
The high lipid content of the myelin sheath is what gives the white matter its whitish appearance.
I thought we just did this. Let's see.
Here you can see I have removed part of the cerebrum so that you can see deeper inside the brain. And the brain consists of two kinds.
I thought we just did that. Did we not just do that? Bear with me just for a second here. Okay, I think, well, let's see if it's different.
Here you can see I have removed part of the cerebrum so that you can see deeper inside the brain. And the brain consists of two kinds of matter. These are gray matter and white matter. Gray matter is represented by this pink color here on the very outer surface of the cerebrum. This is called the cerebral cortex. And the gray matter is mainly found in the cerebral cortex. And then
Okay, we're skipping over this video because I may have copied it twice, because this looks like it's the same video that we just watched. We'll make sure to cover it really well with the PowerPoint. So it's brainstem and the cerebellum.
there are four main parts to the brain. There is this large superior portion called the cerebrum. There is the central portion called the diencephalon. And then there is this inferior portion called the brainstem. The brainstem is then continuous with the spinal cord further on down. The brainstem consists of three parts. It consists of the midbrain, the superior part, the pons, which is the middle part of the brainstem, and then the medulla oblongata, which would be the part then that connects inferiorly with the spinal cord. The brainstem has the critical role of regulating cardiac and respiratory function. It helps to control heart rate and breathing rate. And it also provides the main motor and sensory nerve supply to the face and neck via the cranial nerve. We also have this part of the brain, the fourth part of the brain, which is called the cerebellum. It is referred to as the little brain. You can see that it has folds. These are called cerebellar folia. And you can also see these distinctive white tracts that lie within the cerebellum. These white tracts are called arborvite.
Oh, she already started saying it. What is that called, those little white tracks?
Is that arbor vitae?
Correct.
And that is Latin for tree of life. And so it is the cerebellar white matter. And these tracts carry sensory and motor information to and from the cerebellum. The cerebellum is important because it coordinates voluntary movement. It takes many muscle groups acting together to coordinate muscle movement of our body. And so that is the job of the cerebellum. So let's look at some structures of the brain. Here you see the left side of the brain. So the right side has been removed, and you are seeing a sagittal section of the brain. This larger superior portion of the brain is called the cerebrum. So this would be the left cerebral hemisphere. The very outer portion of the cerebrum contains gray matter, and that is called the cerebral cortex. And then it would be white matter, and then also nuclei deeper within. If we look at this structure here, this is the
What is this structure right here? White matter, what is it?
Corpus callosum.
Corpuscular.
Correct, the corpus callosum.
corpus callosum. This is a major commissural tract. So it contains bundles of myelinated axons.
So the commissural tracts are in here. Remember, we have those, we have the ascension tracts, and we have the trajectory tracts, and we have the commissural tracts.
That relay messages from the left cerebral hemisphere to the right cerebral hemisphere and vice versa. So this is the corpus callosum. It is a large commissural tract. This is another type of tract. So again, it is a bundle of myelinated axons, and this is called the fornix. It is a type of association tract. So it relays messages from the front part of a cerebral hemisphere to the back part of the cerebral hemisphere. So it relays messages within a cerebral hemisphere. If we look at this structure here, there is a thin membrane that lies here called the septum pellucidum. Sitting deep to that, kind of on the other side, would be the lateral ventricle or the left lateral ventricle of the ventricular system. So this thin membrane that lies here, the septum pellucidum, separates the two lateral ventricles of the ventricular system. cerebrospinal fluid is made within the ventricular system, and in the lateral ventricles, it flows into this area, which is the third ventricle, through a little passageway called the interventricular foramen. There is more cerebrospinal fluid made by choroid plexus here on the roof of the third ventricle, and that cerebrospinal fluid then passes down this passageway. This is called the aqueduct of the midbrain, or the cerebral aqueduct, down into this final ventricle called the fourth ventricle. From the fourth ventricle, the cerebrospinal fluid would lead through apertures either to go down into the central canal of the spinal cord or into the subarachnoid space that surrounds to protect and cushion the brain. If we look at this central part of the brain, the central part of the brain is called the diencephalon, and it consists of three parts. There is this large middle part, which is called the thalamus. We can find it easily because sitting right in the center of the thalamus is the intermediate mass. There are two thalami, and so this intermediate mass is an interthalamic adhesion that connects the left thalamus that sits in the left cerebral hemisphere with the right thalamus that sits in the right cerebral hemisphere. The thalamus is a major relay station. So as sensory information comes up from the spinal cord, it is relayed to a specific part of the cerebral cortex to be perceived. So if it's sensory information that contains visual information, then being sent possibly to the occipital lobe here to be perceived as an image. So the thalamus is a major relay station. It also takes motor information from the cerebral cortex and then sends it down into the brain stem and out to the skeletal muscles for voluntary movement. So the thalamus is a major relay station. The next part of the diencephalon is this part here, and this is called the hypothalamus. It's slightly below or inferior to the thalamus, and this is important for controlling our autonomic nervous system, controlling things that are important like our body temperature. The hypothalamus is connected to a major endocrine gland called the pituitary gland, and that's what you see here. It is connected by this little stalk-like structure.
What's that stalk-like structure called?
Is that your pituitary?
No, this is your pituitary. Close. Your pituitary is right here. What is this right here that connects them with the hypothalamus with the pituitary? Called the infundibulum. Infundibulum.
Called the infundibulum. So the infundibulum connects the pituitary gland, which is a major endocrine gland, to the hypothalamus. Sitting posterior to the infundibulum is this small rounded mass of tissue, and this is called a mammillary body. There are two mammillary bodies. You're looking at the left mammillary body, and these are important because they act as a startle reflex to smells. So if you kind of get close to something that's really stinky and you kind of startle or move your head to kind of get away from that harsh smell, that is coming from your mammillary bodies. So they work as a startle reflex for your olfactory pathways.
Do you remember? So mammillary bodies are involved in the startle reflex for olfactory. What about what about reflexes for visual? What about reflexes for visual? So reflexes for visual are the superior colliculi. They look like little mammillary bodies. They're two little adjacent bumps right next to each other. Inferior colliculi are startle reflex for hearing.
If we look at the last part of the diencephalon, we have here the epithalamus, and it contains this endocrine gland called the pineal gland. So the pineal gland.
What does the pineal gland produce? Many of us take this as a supplement to help us sleep.
Serotonin?
Melatonin?
Melatonin.
Melatonin is yes. So that's produced by the pineal gland.
And is part of the epithalamus. It produces a hormone called melatonin, which basically regulates our sleep and wake cycles, our biological clock. Sitting right below the pineal gland is this structure called the corpora quadrigemina.
What does the corpora quadrigemina contain? I just talked about them a second ago, but I didn't refer to them as that. Quadrigemina meaning four of similar things. Mammillary bodies are involved in reflexes when it comes to smell. You know, that's awful smell. Superior colliculi, inferior colliculi. Four little bumps, just like the two little bumps of the mammillary bodies.
Quad because it contains four structures, two superior structures and two inferior structures. Remember, we're only looking at half the brain. So this superior structure would be the superior colliculus, and this inferior structure would be the inferior colliculus, but there would be two superior colliculi, two inferior colliculi to make four structures that are collectively called the corpora quadrigemina. The superior colliculi are important because they act as a startle reflex in response to visual stimuli. So for instance, if you're driving your car and out of your peripheral vision, you see a car coming at you from the side, maybe they're running a red light.
Or in our case here in the east, a deer. I know I'm not the only one who has an issue with seeing deer all the time on the roads.
And you quickly put your foot on the brake. And so that is coming from your superior colliculi. They are acting in response to visual stimuli. Sitting below that are the inferior colliculi, and they act as a startle reflex for auditory stimuli. Maybe you're kind of really concentrating on studying for your anatomy and physiology exam, and someone comes up behind you and says, boo. And so you would immediately turn your head kind of in a startle reflex to that auditory stimulus to sound. So those make up the corpora quadrigemina. We also see here the superior portion of the brainstem, this would be the midbrain, and then we have the middle portion called the pons, and then we have the inferior portion called the medulla oblongata, which would then be continuous with the spinal cord. The brainstem plays a critical role in, for instance, our cardio and vascular centers for controlling heart rate and breathing rate. And then we also see the smaller part of the brain. This is the cerebellum. You see these folds, these are called cerebellar folia. And then sitting within the gray matter of the cerebellum are these tracts of white matter. And they are the arbor vita. And so they are important in receiving sensory information and sending out motor information to coordinate muscle movement and balance.
Okay, I know you guys are excited for parts of the brain song.
The brain's divided into three parts. Forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. The sensory switchboard regulates the sleep and wake. Limbic system regulates feel, drive, emotion. Hippocampus, amygdala, hypothalamus. Hippocampus, memory, long-term memory events. Hypothalamus, releasing hormones, endocrine system. Amygdala, motion into the fear response. Aggressive behavior, anxiety, motivation. The brain reticulum formation, arousal regulating. Medulla breathing, upgrade outside class of respiration, and also face sensations. The cardiovascular functions. For your balance, equilibrium, despite the cerebellum, visual imbalance, attention, control, and motor movements, and your cognitive functions. Language and attention. Intricate organ, we are the understand, controls all our decisions, cognitive functions, and it's got these forms: frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, all different parts control. Cerebrum's made up to an
What part of lobe of the brain did they not cover just there?
The lateral.
Close. So they had the frontal, the temporal, the occipital, and the parietal. Which lobe did they not cover?
Inshallah.
Insula, correct. And I just don't think we don't think about it, and I don't think it's. I'll have to look back at the history and see when it was actually discovered. But it's the most newly discovered, and of course, it's the one we know the least about.
Hemispheres, outer cerebral cortex will control neuron layer, will control all processes, and it's made up of glial cells and nourish, supporting and protecting all of our neurons. Here's the parietal, also monosensory cortex, that's the occipital lobe for visual perception, temporal lobe, benefice, rhythm, language, frontal lobe, broca, speech, comprehension. In the basal ganglia, helps with routine behaviors. The olfactory bulb determine how we taste for flavors. Association layers for higher mental behaviors. The prefrontal cortex of the front end, executive management. Primary motor cortex regulates movements and walking. Three parts control our senses and all our experiences. Intricate organ, we are the understand, controls all our decisions, and cognitive functions, and it's got these forms: frontal, parietal, occipital, temporal, all different parts control. Hi, this is Peter from Anatomy Zone, and in this video we'll be taking a look at the anatomy of the meninges of the brain. Please support us in creating more content by hitting the like button below and subscribing to the channel for updates. The word meninges comes from the ancient Greek menin, which means membrane. We're looking here at a cross-section that shows the skull at the top and the cerebral cortex at the bottom. There are three membranes which encase the brain and the spinal cord: the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. In conjunction with the production and circulation of the cerebral spinal fluid, the meninges function to protect the central nervous system. So let's take a look at the different meningeal layers. We're going to take a coronal section through the head and take a look at a diagrammatic representation of the meninges. just to orientate you to the image, we have the skull on the outside. Inside, we have the left and right cerebral hemisphere, and in the middle, we can see the superior sagittal sinus. You can see the dura mater here, colored in gray.
So if
The
you look,
term dura mater
so here's the I don't remember, periosteal meningeal layer, the inferior layer, and the superior sagittal sinus is in between them. Which is a major sinus for venous return of the blood to the heart. What are these little things right here? Coming up from this layer right here. This meninge.
They look like little dog bones.
They do look like little dog bones. They're not dog bones.
Is that the arachnoid villus?
Yes, they are. So here's the arachnoid villi. What do they do? What's their function?
Do they, I'm guessing, do they like help with the blood? Like that's pulling through?
Something similar to blood.
Or is it CHF? Not CHF. Jesus Christmas.
CSF. I understood. It's cerebral spinal fluid.
I think I just combined CHF and CSF.
So here, the subarachnoid space contains the cerebral spinal fluid. So here's the arachnoid monitor. Subarachnoid space returns the cerebral spinal fluid. The arachnoid villi returns the cerebral spinal fluid back to the blood. Remember how it's secreted from the blood through the ependymal cells?
that comes from the Latin, which literally translates as tough mother. This outer layer provides a thick, tough, and inelastic covering which lies next to the stem. It envelops the arachnoid mater and supports the dural-venous sinuses. It's classically described as having two layers, the meningeal layer, which lies next to the brain, and the periosteal layer, which lies next to the cranial bones and which adheres to the surface of the cranium. Between the two layers of the dura mater, as we can see here, are the dural-venous sinuses, and here, as I mentioned, we see the superior sagittal sinus. The dura mater itself folds in certain places, and these folds compartmentalize different areas of the brain. There are four important folds to know about, which you'll often hear referred to as dural reflections. First is the falx cerebral, which is the largest dural fold. This fold, which you can see here in this diagram, runs in the middle within the longitudinal fissure between the cerebral hemispheres. It gets its name from its crescenteric sickle-like shape, which you can see in this illustration. Anteriorly, it attaches to the frontal crest and to the crista galli. Posteriorly, it merges into the second important dural reflection, the tentorium cerebelli. You can see here that the superior sagittal sinus is contained within the superior margin of the falx cerebral, and running within its inferior margin is the inferior sagittal sinus. I've switched to another illustration, and here we can see the tentorium cerebelli. You can see how the fibers of the falx blend into the tentorium cerebelli, which is situated posteriorly. This is the second largest dural fold. The word tentorium is Latin for tent. So this fold separates the occipital lobes from the cerebellum and forms a tent-like structure over the cerebellum. Anteriorly, it attaches to the crinoid processes of the sternum, anterolaterally to the plexus temporal bone, and posteriorly.
What's this bone right here? Remember from a while ago when we were talking about the bones of the skull?
Is it the sphenoid?
Phenoid.
It's a sphenoid bone. So yep, it's the bird on crack bone right there.
Spheroid, it has attachments to the internal parts of the occipital and parietal bones.
What's this? What's this hole right here?
Magnum. Foramen.
Foramen. Which foramen is it, Layla?
Magnum.
Magnum, correct.
This dual fold is important and divides the bone into supratentorial and infratentorial compartments.
So when I was asking you about the adult versus child tumors, adult tumors tend to be supratentorial, meaning they're above the tentorium cerebelli. Child tumors tend to be infratentorial, meaning they're below the tentorium cerebelli.
I've just switched to a superior view looking down at the tentorium, and you can see that the anterior free edge has this concave notch. This is known as the tentorial notch or tentorial incision and allows the midbone to pass through. Third, we have the falx cerebelli, and as the name suggests, and having just looked at the falx cerebri, you might guess that this dual reflection partially separates the cerebellar hemisphere. The fourth and smallest fold to mention is the diaphragma celli. This fold covers the sella turcica and the pituitary gland.
Oh, never mind.
There is a small opening in it which allows the pituitary stalk and hypophyseal vessels to pass through. The next meningeal layer is the arachnoid marker, which you can see here coloured in red. Between the dura marker and the arachnoid marker is a potential space, the subdural space, which contains a thin film of lymphatic fluid. The arachnoid marker is very closely applied to the dura marker in normality, but the subdural space can be opened with trauma or other pathological processes. In the context of trauma,
A lot of times I learned that the subdural space is actually not a space until bleeding pools in there and develops and pushes it into being a space. So the blood going into it creates a space that's called the subdural space. So when we talk about subdural bleeds, a subdural hematoma, it's not a space until the blood moves into it because of trauma.
blood can get in between the dura marker and the arachnoid marker, separating the two membranes. This is known as a subdural hemorrhage or hematoma. The arachnoid marker is the middle meningeal layer and gets its name from its spiderweb-like appearance. You can see here that it has thin filaments known as arachnoid tuberculations, which traverse the subarachnoid space and blend with the clear marker, like a spiderweb. The arachnoid layer is a thin, transparent membrane which cushions the CNS. It doesn't follow the gyral and sulcal contours of the bone and provides a loose-fitting covering. In places, there are aggregations of small arachnoid villi which herniate through the dura marker into the dural venous sinuses. These are known as arachnoid granulations and allows VSS to enter back into the circulation. The subarachnoid
So arachnoid granulations, arachnoid villi, same thing.
space, unlike the subdural space, which is only a potential space, is a normal anatomical space between the arachnoid and clear marker that is filled with CSF. There are several anatomical spaces which are formed at different points around the brain, where these subarachnoid spaces are quite large and filled with lots of CSF. These are known as systems. The patency of these subarachnoid systems is important for proper CSF circulation. Various pathological processes within the brain can cause effacement of these systems and impair CSF circulation, leading to hydrocephalus. I won't go into detail about these different systems, but some of the key ones to know about are the cisterna magna, the suprasellar, and the various perimesencephalic systems. The final layer is the pia mater. Pia mater is Latin for tender mother. This is a fine, thin membrane which adheres to the surface of the brain and does follow the gyro and cycle contours. This is a highly vascular membrane with many vessels piercing it to supply the brain. As a point of terminology, you may hear these two inner layers, the arachnoid mater and the pia mater, referred to as leptomeninges, which is Greek for thin membrane. The converse term for the buromater is pachymeninges. So that completes this tutorial on the meninges of the brain. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and check out our Patreon page. Thanks for watching.
We definitely haven't done any of this, but I think this is what I'm going to try to develop your case study around, this cranial nerve testing.
This is Sarah with RegisteredNurseRN.com, and in this video, I'm going to be going over a nursing assessment of the cranial nerves 1 through 12. And if you would like to watch a complete head-to-toe nursing assessment, you can access this card up here in the corner or in the YouTube description below to watch that video. So the first thing what you want to do is you want to provide privacy to the patient, perform hand hygiene, and explain what you will be doing. So let's get started. We're going to test the olfactory cranial nerve 1, the sense of smell. So then what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you close your eyes and I'm going to put something in front of your nose and have you breathe in and smell, and you tell me what you smell. And whenever you do this, use something that's pleasant smelling, not something that's really stinky, because it could elicit like a gag reflex or something like that if the person has a sensitive nose. Okay.
Vanilla.
Okay, and this was vanilla extract, and that is correct. So that cranial nerve is intact. To test cranial nerve 2, you're going to be doing 2 tests. Number 1, you're going to look at the confrontation visual field, and you're going to be looking at their peripheral vision. Next, we'll be looking at visual acuity and using a Snellen chart to assess that. First, we're going to test the peripheral vision by doing the confrontation visual field test. And to do that, you're going to have the patient stand in front of you about arm's length away. Okay, then what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you cover up your right eye. And I'm also going to cover up my left eye, so on the same side. And then I want you to look at this eye and don't look at my fingers, okay? And I just want you to tell me how many fingers you see. And you're going to do this in the upper and lower visual fields and about the middle of the visual field. So here we go.
2,
Correct.
3,
Very good. Okay, let's do on opposite. Again, stare at this eye, okay? And don't look at my fingers.
3, 1.
Very good. Now we're going to test visual acuity using a Snellen chart. And what you're going to do is you're going to have your patient stand about 20 feet from the chart. So Ben, if you'll stand about right there for me, and ask your patient, do you wear glasses?
No.
Okay, and if your patient does wear glasses, you'll want them to wear those for this test. Okay, so what we're going to do, look at that chart over there and try to read the lowest line for me that you can read, okay? And first we're going to cover your right eye, then your left eye, and then we'll do both eyes, okay? So cover your right eye. Okay, and what line can you read?
3,
Okay, read it for me.
B, E, F, P, O, P, E, C.
Okay, very good. Okay, now we're going to cover up your left eye and do the same thing. And again, whatever line you can read, let me know. 8 again, okay.
B, E, F, P, O, P, E, C.
Okay, and now read with both eyes. And what line?
What nerve are you testing with that? What cranial nerve are you testing?
Optic nerve.
No, I'm close. It is a sight one, but it's not that one. It's the one that actually controls the lens. It's a motor. It's solely motor. Optic is solely sensation.
Ocular motor?
Yep, it's the ocular motor.
Okay. Okay, and he read from line 8, so that means that he has 20/20 vision. And this means that he can see the same line of letters at 20 feet that a person with normal vision can see at 20 feet. However, let's say that in his left eye, he could only read like line 6, which is 20/30. That would mean that his left eye sees at 20 feet that a person with normal vision would see at 30. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to assess cranial nerve 3, which is ocular motor, 4, trochlear, and then 6.
Yeah, you're right. So it was actually optic that she was testing before, but I think it works for both. Because it's going to test your optic to be able to identify that. Your oculomotor is what changes your lenses, the lens in your eye. So it would be both. You have your oculomotor changes the lens. But wouldn't it also? But it would also affect whether or not how well your oculomotor is working with that lens. No, your oculomotor. Your optic is specifically sensation. Yes. Ocular motor is what changes the lens also. It's both.
So is the ocular motor what you're testing with Pearl?
With what?
Pearl? Pupils equal round reactive to
Yes. Pupils are equal and reactive to light as your ocular motor.
Okay.
Which is abducens. Then we're going to do several tests to check their function. The first one, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking for any involuntary shaking of the eye called nystagmus. And how we're going to do that is we're going to take our pen light. We're going to hold it about 12 to 14 inches away from the patient's nose. And then what I want you to do is keep your head still, don't move your head, and just use your eyes to watch where I move the pen light. And as you're doing this, you're going to perform it in the 6 cardinal fields of gaze. And you're just going to move it and you're looking for any involuntary shaking of the eyes. So here we go. Next, we're going to see how reactive the pupils are to light. And to do that, we're going to dim the lights a little bit, and we're going to have the patient stare off at a distant object that helps dilate those pupils. And then we're going to shine using our pen light in at the side, and we're going to see how that pupil responds. It should constrict, and then on the other side, it should constrict as well. So say their baseline pupil size was like 3 millimeters, it should go down to 1 milliliter, and it should happen on both sides. Okay, so Ben, stare off at that object right on the wall over there for me. Okay, and that dilates the pupils, and we're just going to shine light in at the side. Okay, constrict.
I don't know.
Okay, and dilate again, and then go over to the other side.
My mom has unequal pupils all the time. We're not sure if you'd be able to see it or not.
I have a friend who has that too, but it's because he has I think he's like a clot or something in one of his arteries that he doesn't get enough blood flow to one side.
Mine is called anisocoria. It is a benign condition.
That's good.
Yeah. So how would we get them so they could see it? But I don't know. The camera is right there. Yeah, but I don't. Are they able to see me clearly enough? With this in the way? Maybe.
Okay. So you'll have to tell the left is greater than the right by about 1 millimeter.
May need to get a little closer one.
Can you see it, Jen? No response. Okay.
I think we could get if more light maybe, but it's really hard to tell.
Get a flashlight. I got it. I got a phone light.
Okay, I don't know if that helps or not.
I can't tell.
Okay, I'm afraid it wouldn't be clear enough.
Try this.
Because that'll just make the pupil smaller, both of them.
All right. Oh well. Next time, Mother. Okay.
So I have a friend that's a boxer, and I guess from a head injury, he has nystagmus all the time now.
Wow.
Nice diagnosis.
Yeah.
You've seen
Wow.
my brother do that. He can do, Willis used to be able to do it on purpose.
Do the nystagmus.
Yeah.
All the,
Some of his sons.
Is that the one where your pupil just shakes?
yes.
Oh.
Yeah, they just jiggle back and forth.
Does it affect vision at all? Like,
Affect what?
Vision.
Oh yeah, well, it jiggles your vision.
that would really suck.
That same thing back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if it happened all the time, if you would just kind of like get used to it or.
We're definitely doing a case study on the cranial nerves.
Okay.
I think this will be the most interesting.
It is. It's fascinating.
He functioned really well. Like he completed school, he was still boxing, and does all the things.
She says his brain must have compensated in a lot of ways. A movie that you should see if you can handle it is the movie Concussion. Have you seen that one? Jen has. She's the only one that I can see her face here. It is based on, it's one of my favorite movies because I like all the science in it. He does some histological sections and so forth, but it's based on a professor who is at UC Davis right now, University of California at Davis. And he was the one who brought it to the attention of the NFL that that chronic concussions can cause traumatic encephaly. And he essentially got almost chased out of New York when he first started bringing it to the forefront. I can't remember his name, but if you want to look it up, it's a sad movie in that it took several years for the NFL to concede that consistent concussions can lead to what did he call it? Consistent concussions leading to consistent what dementia, almost dementia-like symptoms. There's a part in the movie and it's rated PG-13 for a reason.
It's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
Yeah, and it's nasty. It's nasty. He shows a scene in the movie. There's a scene in the movie where he's trying to explain to his wife why this would be bad, because if you think about a woodpecker who's constantly pecking at a piece of wood, and and his head is constantly banging into the wood, and he makes a comment to his wife, he says, our brains were not designed to be like that. They are not designed to consistently undergo trauma like that. And eventually you're going to do some major damage if it's constantly trying to repair itself. And that's what it was. And he makes the comment, and it's Will Smith is the actor in it. And he makes the comment in it, he says, I have to understand why a man who is, I'm trying to remember if he was 43 or 53, why a 53-year-old man would manually pull out his own teeth and super glue them back in repeatedly. And it's a sad movie because of all that occurred with him and his wife trying to get the NFL to recognize that consistent concussions, kind of like what Muhammad Ali dealt with before he died, can lead to dementia-like symptoms. And nothing wrong with the brain. It has to do with a protein called a tau protein, that it eventually forms plaques. They're tau plaques. And yeah, it's one of my favorite movies because I like the fact that he, all he had to persevere through to get the world to recognize that this was a real issue. And I think they say that approximately 20 to 40% of all football players run the risk of developing this in the long run.
Didn't they put on a limitation to how many concussions somebody can have now? The NFL and boxing
Did they?
and UFC. I thought so.
I don't know about that. I've looked into that book. I've looked into that movie. I've looked into the story because I was so interested in it. But he's now, the man who discovered it is now a professor at the University of California, Davis, because he got chased out of Philadelphia and New York for bringing this to the surface. And yeah, it's a sad movie in that it you see a lot of these football players developing symptoms of dementia early in life, and a lot of them committing suicide over just traumatic concussions.
Do the same, and they both constricted in equal size. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to check for accommodation. And how we do that is we turn the lights back on. We just previously had them dim, but we now make it light again. We're going to have him stare off at a distant object that helps to dilate the pupils. And we're going to take a pen light. You can use a pen light finger, and you're just going to slowly move it inward to the nose. And what you're looking for is that those pupils constrict, they accommodate, and the eyes cross while looking at the pen light. So here we go. Stare off in the distance, please. And I don't want you to move your head or anything. Just keep it real still and just follow this pen light, okay? Ready? Okay, so now we can document, because we just checked all of the things with the eyes, we can document that the pupils are equal, round, reactive to light, and accommodate. So that's where that acronym PERRLA comes into play. We're going to go ahead and test cranial nerve 5, which is the trigeminal nerve. And this nerve is responsible for many things like mastication. So what I'm going to have you do then is I'm going to have you clench your teeth, like bite down for me. And I'm going to feel the masseter muscle, which is right there. It should be a nice firm ball. and then feel the temporal muscle. Now what I'm going to do to also test that nerve is have him try to open his mouth against resistance. So try to do that for me. Okay, and he can do that. And while we're here, we're going to go ahead and look at the facial expressions and test cranial nerve 7, which is the facial nerve. So can you close your eyes tightly for me and open them up? Okay, now smile for me, frown, and puff out your cheeks. Okay, and he did that with ease, so that cranial nerve is intact. Next, we're going to test cranial nerve 8, which is the vestibulocochlear nerve. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to include one of his ears and then whisper 2 words on the other side. He needs to tell me what I said. So, you ready?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to include this one.
Apple, banana.
Okay, very good.
Cat, dog.
Okay, and that nerve is intact. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to assess cranial nerve 9, the glossopharyngeal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you say ah, and what you want is that uvula to move up. Okay, and then we're just going to test the gag reflex. I'm sort of just going to poke a little bit back there and elicit the gag reflex. Okay, there you go. Gag's really good. And cranial nerve 10, the vagus is intact because he's able to talk to me without hoarseness, and he's able to swallow. Then what we're going to do is we're going to test cranial nerve 11, which is the accessory nerve. So then what I'm going to have you do is move your head side to side, up and down. Okay, and then shrug, try to shrug against my resistance. And he does that with ease, so that nerve is intact. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to assess cranial nerve 12, which is the hypoglossal nerve. And what I'm going to have you do, Ben, is I'm going to have you stick out your tongue and move it side to side. Okay, and he does that with ease. Okay, so that wraps up how to perform a nursing assessment of the cranial nerves. And don't forget to check out that head-to-toe.
Okay, I know you're ready for another song, cranial nerve song. See what it is.
Cranial nerves emerge directly from the brain, unlike spinal nerves in the spinal cord domain. The first 2 cranial nerves arise from the cerebrum, while the other 10 nerves arise from the brainstem. Your special senses are olfaction, audition, vision, gustation, detected by specialized organs, which collect this information. Your general senses are temperature, vibration, pressure, touch, and pain, detected over a whisper area and sent to your brain. Cranial nerve 1 the olfactory helps you detect smells, transmitting signals that come from olfactory epithelial cells. The second, the optic nerve, transmits retinal fluid. This nerve allows you to see, so here it is not. Pupils are constricted by the third nerve, the oculomotor, also running for eye muscle with the eyeballs main motor. It talks to the integer westfall and back to the motor nuclei to complement the accommodation and lift the upper lid of your eye. The fourth, the trochlear nerve. On the trochlear nucleus relies in order to control the superior open muscles of your eyes. The fifth, the trigeminal, the largest of the cranial nerves, controlling mastication muscles or chewing food and nerves. It senses temperature, touch, and pain in your scalp, face, mandibles, larynx, pharynx, sinuses, and oral nasal cavities. The sixth, the abducens nerve on the abducens nucleus relies to innervate the lateral rectus muscles of your eyes. The seventh, the facial nerve, will touch behind your ear and control facial expressions like happiness or fear. To transmit intake from the front, 2/3 of the tongue gets devoted and has secrete a motor function for all the glands except the carotid. The eighth, the vestibulocochlear, this nerve has 2 talents, linking the semicircular canals about the hypoglossal nerve has motor function solely and innervates extrinsic and intrinsic tongue muscles totally, except for the palatal which elevates the tongue back part and is innervated by the vagus nerve that sets it apart.
Okay, let's take a few minutes. I think I'll look at the PowerPoint. I haven't done any of these practice naming things. Do you want me to go through this with you? We've had a few of them, and I think I've gone through like one or two, but we've had more than a few. Let's just see. I'm gonna look at the worksheets, and then we can decide. But I'm gonna get up and move around too. So take 10 minutes. I know. You don't want to be fine with your face off.
Hey, Professor.
Yeah.
I had a quick question. This has not really technically to do with the topic that we're on today, but I'm pretty sure my sister has a UTI just from what she was like describing to me.
Yeah.
And like I was just curious, like how long can you let that? Because like those don't clear up without antibiotics, correct?
No, and the longer she lets it go, the harder it will be to take care of.
Because it could spread to the kidneys, and then from the
it can spread to the kidneys, but ask Miss Jen here, who's right there. Give me one, Mom. Let me ask her.
I know people, they'll buy like the cranberry. It's in like the feminine care aisles in most like drugstores.
Mm-hmm.
It can clear up on your own. Like I forget the amount of time you can let it go before it's bad. I want to say it's like a week or so. Like if she has it for more than a week, she really needs to go to a doctor.
Okay, so
Right.
here's my mom. Courtney, ask my mom the question.
Okay. I was asking her, my sister has been complaining of basically I know it's UTI. I've had them before, where it's the burning sensation. She's got really bad lower abdominal pain, a lot of discharge. So I'm like, okay, that's got to be what it is. Now this is the second day she's had it. Now she's done some things to help, and it's helped with it, like the hot pad on her stomach, taking Activia, cranberry, stuff like that. So it's like I know it'll help, but some people say it'll go away on its own, some say it won't. So it's like we want to take her to urgent care, but also my parents are like, well, she feels better. So
is she drinking lots of water?
That's just gonna mask her symptoms. That's all
what
that's
I said.
Gonna do. Yeah.
I was like, it's taking
It's gonna
care
go
of the
to your
symptoms.
kidney, probably.
No,
that's what I said. I said, then once it goes to the kidney, then she can go septic. So I'm like, we don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That's ugly. That's ugly.
Yeah.
She
and
needs
it's like
some Cipro in her life.
And sometimes you can get the point where you can't pee.
Yeah.
That's what she's like, I have to pee all the time, and sometimes it's a lot, sometimes it's not. I'm like, yeah, it's just antibiotics.
Painful when she pees?
Yeah, she said it burns.
Okay.
I'm like,
yeah, soon it's gonna be hematuria, so she's gonna get blood up in there.
yeah, I just wanted some more.
Don't sit on it.
Don't sit on it. Okay. I told her she wants to finish her math class, which is at 10:30. It's done at 10:30. I said, well, I'm done at 10:45, so we're going when we're done.
Good plan. Good plan. I only know UTIs in cats, and I know that they're not good. So I'm like, I don't know a lot about people and UTIs. Yeah. No.
Tell her
when
to
I
take
had mine, it was terrible.
probiotics.
Yes.
Once she gets on the antibiotics, make sure she takes probiotics, because every time I'm on an antibiotic, I then get a yeast infection.
Yeah. And
That's what I told her as well. I'm like,
will give you the antibiotic if they're really on top of their game. Give you the antibiotic with the aftercare treatment.
with the probiotic. That's what they did for me. Yeah.
With the diflucan, yes.
And that I at least know to ask for that. That's why Dad's like, well, you're gonna come with me. So I don't know what I'm doing.
No, he's a guy. He wouldn't know.
He tries to get my mom to go, but she's kind of clueless on a lot of this stuff too for being a woman. But he's like, you go. You've dealt with it. You go. I'm like, okay, Dad.
When I was in basic training, I had to tell females that they had more than one hole.
Oh my
I had to have a class about
Really?
that. Yeah, they didn't know that there's a urethra and a vagina.
Oh, that's
Listen,
That
I
hurts
thought it was
me.
the same thing for the longest time as well until I started getting into
Other things. But
sex
these
ed.
are like
Yeah.
20-year-olds, so yeah.
I was very sheltered. The
Women, a lot of women don't understand their anatomy.
and it doesn't help when you're raised in a closed off church school that doesn't have biology and doesn't teach you. But when we graduate, we're supposed to go have babies.
what. Whatever we do, don't talk about that. When closed off schools, whatever we do, don't talk about that. No. When you're at school. Well,
I'm sorry, that's
the
not up
idea
for
that we're not-
discussion.
we're not going to teach sex education. We're not going to teach them about that kind of stuff because we don't want them even going that door.
We don't want them thinking about it, even though they're thinking about it. Okay.
Nope.
The most ironic thing is when they go to graduate, like half of them are pregnant. They're like, man, I wonder why.
I don't know what happened. Yeah, and a lot of them are clueless.
Yeah. And
Sad. It's a scary situation where
We must have hugged too long.
oh,
right.
it's that special kind of hug. This
The holding hands was just too much. It was just the tip. It was too much.
you're gonna get pregnant from holding hands. Whatever you do, don't do it.
Now that's scary.
Kids.
I once got yelled at while playing basketball with males at a Christian camp because we were like checking each other, and I'm like, it's a sport.
You bumped into him.
I was like, okay.
Wait, what do you mean?
Checking.
I got yelled at because I was playing with males at a Christian camp, and we were like bumping into each other, like because you like check each other.
Yeah.
So they were like, no
against each
physical
other.
contact. I'm like,
How do
It's
you
a physical sport.
yeah, it's a contact sport.
Oh my god.
Jen,
That's funny.
what were you thinking?
I know. I don't know.
Plus, it was her hormones just
Yeah.
going everywhere.
Oh dear. Right. That's funny. Okay. Yeah, so
Jen gone wild.
I know. I'm a little worried. What was she thinking? It's really funny. I don't think, my mom has told me when I was younger I had UTIs, but I don't think I've ever had one. I don't even, but I know I've seen them in cats, and the longer they prolong it, the harder they are to get rid of.
Yeah, my kitty Arlo, he had one, and he just kept trying to pee everywhere, but it was like little drops of blood. I'm like, okay, well that's bad. All right, you need to go get seen. And I'm like, damn it! I'm like, what the hell?
I think I had one when I was like 16, but it was only for like 2 days, and it just kind of went away after that. But I don't know.
And I guess it all depends on what bacteria caused it, depending on how like bad it's gonna be or how much actually got in there. So
Yeah.
Well, and it starts crystallizing. I mean, I would think of it almost as being something like a gallstone.
Like a calculi. Like
Caliculi, where it starts to crystallize. And I know, I had a cat that I volunteered with the Humane Society before I moved to the East Coast. And I had a cat that was returned to me, and I so wanted to slap those people because I know they returned me back because he was peeing when he shouldn't and peeing in places outside of the litter box. They didn't tell me that. They just told me that they didn't want him. That for some reason they couldn't have him anymore. I had 13 cats at the time.
Ooh. I
couldn't tell you who was peeing everywhere until I'm sitting on my bed. He goes under the sheets, comes out, and my leg is all wet. And I think, honestly, when cats, I think animals in general, when they start doing things like that, they're trying to tell you there's a problem. And just because you don't get it isn't their fault. And I think, you know, I know especially with my cats, like this one who's sometimes a booger, um, he tries to tell you that there's a problem. And so I've only dealt with UTIs in cats, and I know that the longer they go, the more awful they are.
Yeah, and then mine just have the issue now of they get food now like on regular schedule. Like they get like a half cup every couple of hours.
Yeah.
Well, not a couple hours, like 4 or 5. But they will eat me out of house and home. They're in the cupboards. They're eating cookies. They're eating chips. They're just like eating. I'm like, I've had them since like literally 4 weeks old. So I've hand bottle fed them, like everything. And I'm like, why are you? And they're in my trash. I'm like, oh my God, you're worse than the dog I had, which would do the same thing. But we actually rescued him. So he was used to being in a trash can because that's where he got his food. So I understood that. But I'm like, you guys were bottle fed. I've had you since 4 weeks old. Why are you in my, you get food.
Are they fixed?
Yes, they finally
Okay.
got fixed like last month, but they still, it's not as bad.
Yeah.
Before it was like every day.
Once that testosterone goes down, it'll get a little better.
That's what everybody's telling me. I'm like, they're still dick holes though. Like,
Oh yeah.
I'm like,
I have a lock on my trash can.
Yeah.
To get baby locks for my actual cupboards, and like I put them inside of other like, and then they like
containers.
Chew. Yeah, they chew on the containers again. I'm like, you have food in your bowl. There's food in your bowl. Eat the food in your bowl.
Okay, I'm glad my cats aren't like that, and I don't have to put a lock. I make sure that the garbages are not where they can easily get into them.
It doesn't. I put mine in an actual cupboard. They open up the cupboard door, get into the trash. I'm like, I am.
You know, you may be a booger, but you're not that big of a booger.
My cats have this weird thing where they like chips, and like we never fed them chips. They just decided that they like them. So you can't like put bags down, like folded over on top of things. Like they will legit go over to it, bite the bag open, and start eating chips. And just like look at you, and you're like, I swear to God, why are you like this? You have food.
If it was like them going for chicken or something, I'd get it. But no, I came home the other day and they had a Nutri-Grain bar completely torn apart. I'm like, what the hell?
They're
You
eating
guys
healthy at least.
Sometimes, and then I found pretzels on the other side of the floor, and then they love goldfish. I don't get it. They love goldfish. They get in the diaper bag. It's where I keep them for my son, the little travel ones. And they get in there and pull them out and eat them.
It sounds like they're bored, to be honest.
Maybe, but it's like when I try to play with them, they're like, no.
Are they?
They're not. They're like 9 to 10 months old, so they're still technically
Yeah,
kittens.
they're still babies. It might be
Yeah.
for a long time.
I'm like, would you just chill out? It doesn't help that they're brothers, so I'm like, they're probably even worse because of that. But
yeah,
I don't know. I love them though.
Each other's energy levels. Wow.
Yes.
No, you know, this one that's in my lap here, he can come here, show your face. This is the one that I was getting all mad on when we were in the last class to show off his fight or flight response. Say hi. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cute.
He's my little Maine Coon, but he got really sick and got down to 6.5 pounds before.
That's tiny for a Maine Coon. Those things are huge.
He's never been really big, but he got down to 6.5 pounds, and I was just oblivious. And I finally, when I took him into the vet, we found out that the endothelium along his absorption endothelium along his small GI intestines was thickened up, meaning that he didn't have the ability to absorb the nutrients out of his food. And so he was essentially digesting and breaking down all his muscles for food. You know, dealing, you know, anorexic with the fact that he was eating all the time. And so now he's on a homemade food that I discovered when I was working with the Humane Society. And he's doing better than he probably has been in a couple of years. Catabolism. It's not catabolism, it's catabolism. Catabolism. When you're breaking down your muscles for food, it's catabolism. Yeah, but now he's actually bigger than he ever has been before at 12 pounds. And when I moved out here, he was 9.5.
So does he need like high protein?
It's high protein, so it's a food that a friend got me, that a friend recommended to me for another cat that I had. And it is eggs, it's chicken thighs, it's chicken liver, it's fish oil, it's taurine, it's vitamin E, and B6 super B complex. And I mean, and he loves it.
So basically oil, chicken, and like oil and protein, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's chicken thighs, it's chicken liver, it's vitamin E, and it can't be the synthetic. It's not the type you buy at the store. It's the synthetic is the one you buy at the store, and it's not that one. And super B complex. Oh, it's bone meal powder. That's the other one that's in there. And he's done. I mean, he did it. I felt bad because I didn't realize that for probably easily a year to 2 years, he's probably been going downhill. And I'm like, you know, Mary, at what point did you really not see this coming? I mean, he was matting all the time, and I was cutting mats out of his hair because you can see he's a long-haired cat. And since he started putting back on the weight, he doesn't mat at all, ever. And I think I tuned out. I didn't see it. I feel bad for that reason because he's 13 years old. And I told my mom that once he gets to 14 years old, I can probably deal with, if he goes downhill at that point, which will be next June. If he goes downhill at that point, I'll be ready to let him go. But until that point, I'm not ready. All right.
What's his name?
His name is Leo.
Leo, that's right. Cool.
Yeah,
awesome. Good name.
He's a booger in that he's a firecracker like you saw the other day. And he's got my mom wrapped around all 10 fingers and all 10 toes when it comes to his food, and gets out every second of the day. For me, when she was gone for a week, somehow he survived because he was only eating probably 3 or 4 times a day. But she comes home, and every second she's available, he's on her to get out his food that's in the.
We actually got our cats. It's from Amazon. It's an automated food dispenser. Yeah. So like it 4 times a day, it gives them like a 1/4 to 1/2 cup of food. Yeah. It's like plenty for both of them. Yeah. And they like try to claw at it now. They stand on top of it, try to push the button to open it. They try to like knock it over to get the food out. They put their paws underneath, like, hey, I know food comes out here. Come on. And I'm like, would you just leave it alone? They already messed up the button, so I had to like refix it for them. You guys are nuts. Like, you're gonna make yourself not get food because you keep messing with it. Leave it alone.
I'm for some reason I'm glad I don't have kittens now. I'll show you a picture on Monday. I have a friend who just rescued 3 different kittens that were approximately the same age, but not siblings. And there was a person who had their Christmas tree on Facebook, had their Christmas tree tacked onto a cement block with bungee cords, and said, "Okay, cats, bring your A game." And I'm
awesome.
I thought that is so ideal, because I didn't have a Christmas tree for a couple of years when I was working with the Humane Society for that reason.
I have kids. The first year we had it up was terrible. I'm like, no, we're waiting till you're older. Now we have cats. I'm like, yeah, we're definitely waiting. So we have it. It's underneath in the back bedroom, but I'm like, we're not putting it up for like at least another 2-3 years, because I'm like, I'm not dealing with that.
I woke up and my fake tree had fainted. And they didn't do it again. Like, I put it back up again and they didn't do it again. And I think it scared them enough the first time around, bringing that down in the middle of the night, that they were like, okay, we won't do that one again.
Mine are still too stupid to realize to stop doing things.
They might. If you do it with a tree, they might, because that's traumatic when that thing falls over. You know, they had no idea that was going to happen. All right, let's go into this PowerPoint really quickly here. It's a short one. So one of your questions asks you about testing cranial nerves. Do it or don't do it, because it requires someone else. Either you can do it or you don't have to do it. It doesn't matter. You can maybe go back and look at that video and answer the same questions, but do it or don't do it, it doesn't matter. Because it's hard, it's not something you're going to be able to get within our lifetime. Meninges of the brain. Remember DAP, dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater. Dura mater is 2 layers, the periosteal layer and the meningeal layer in the brain. And like Jen said, it's only 1 layer in the spinal cord, the dura mater. So from what I heard, a subdural hematoma, a subdural space is only created when blood rushes into it and makes that space. So a subdural space is not an actual anatomical normal space until bleeding occurs and creates that space. But can it cause death even though it's not in the brain? Yes, because it's putting pressure on all of this. So composed of 2 layers, the periosteal layer that's attached to the skull. Remember, osteo meaning brain. Meningeal layer is attached to the arachnoid mater. The dural venous sinuses are between these 2 layers. The meningeal layer and the periosteal layer. The double layered dura mater extends deep into the longitudinal fissure, creating the false cerebri. Arachnoid granuli or granulosum, arachnoid mater, pia mater, right up against the skull, right up against the cerebrum. Subarachnoid space, superior sagittal sinus, false cerebri, cerebrum, white matter of the cerebrum, gray matter of the cerebrum. Major brain regions. There's a part in your worksheet that asks for the 4 regions. If you go to the next page, you understand a lot more of what it's referring to with the 4 regions in the worksheet. The diencephalon, the brainstem, the cerebellum, and the cerebrum. Diencephalon, cerebrum, cerebellum, brainstem. Identifying external brain structures. The gyres are the elevations or the folds, increases the surface area of the neuronal cell bodies. Sulcus is the shallow grooves between the elevations. Precentral gyrus, remember that this is the primary motor cortex. Postcentral gyrus, general somatosensory. Special senses are everything except for touch, pressure, temperature, something related to the skin. Everything that you sense with your skin is going to be somatosensory. All of your other senses are special senses. So general senses are everything that you recognize with your skin. You feel with your skin. So primary somatosensory receives nerve impulses for touch. Okay, also proprioception. So within the joints is the primary somatosensory. Primary motor, precentral, postcentral. What's this deep groove right here?
Cerebral cortex?
A longitudinal fissure.
That's it, longitudinal. Shallow groove right here. It starts actually about right here. What is that?
The pre.
Not the pre, you're close. What, not the precentral, but it's a shallow fit, it's a fissure. It's a groove. It's a sulcus.
Oh.
Central groove.
Central sulcus. I would say, here's the shallow groove. So that's a central sulcus. Precentral, postcentral. With this being the back of the brain, posterior side.
Occipital.
Yes, occipital, correct. Identifying the lobes. Occipital, temporal, insula, frontal lobe, and parietal lobe. Reason we like to name the cranial nerves, and we like to name them 1 through 12, helps us remember where they come off the brainstem from the anterior side to the posterior side. So olfactory nerve, cranial nerve number 1, on they traveled and found Voldemort guarding very ancient Horcruxes. So olfactory, optic, oculomotor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, glossopharyngeal, vagus, and of course the spinal accessory has to be the weird one. So spinal accessory, hypoglossal. Mammillary bodies. Remember, there are reflex centers for smell. Fornix, corpus callosum, hypothalamus, the major regulator of the autonomic nervous system, pituitary gland, the pituitary stalk or the infundibulum, mammillary bodies, the corpora quadrumina, the superior colliculi, the inferior colliculi, the arbor vitae, cerebellum, pons, midbrain, medulla oblongata, pineal gland, puts out the melatonin, part of the epithalamus, ventricles of the brain, where the cerebrospinal fluid is created and starts its flow. Lateral ventricles, third ventricle, in between the third and the fourth ventricle, the cerebral aqueduct. Remember, the choroid plexus is that network of vessels that are lined with ependymal cells, that neuroglia that create and produce and circulate the central cerebrospinal fluid. Ventricles of the brain. The flow of cerebrospinal fluid. You have the same thing in your book. I know there's a diagram in your book that asks you to map out the cerebrospinal fluid flow. It actually looks just like this. So it's going to ask you to map it out. It looks just like this. Functions of the cranial nerves. How do we test for them? 12 pairs of cranial nerves. You guys, that's the end. So we have 9 minutes. Do you want me to put you into breakout rooms? No?
Nah.
Okay. If you want to start, I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna sit here. I'll start looking at the worksheet. If you have questions, hand them to me.
So what all do we have to do for today's homework? Is it the lab 11 worksheets?
Yes.
Or the worksheet?
Yes. I wouldn't worry. There's a part where it says you need a partner for cranial testing, cranial nerve testing. Do it or don't do it, because if you don't have a partner, it isn't going to work. I don't.
Most of them you could see in that one video you did earlier with the test too, so you could always go back to that one for those activities
Exactly.
too.
So what I'm saying is you don't have to do it. You can do it if you want to with that video, but you don't have to do it at all.
So do we just have that one, excuse me, 18-page worksheet to submit, or is there other ones too that we have to submit?
I think it's only 11 pages. I think there's 2 of them. So there's this one also. This is I think it's a 2-page one. So there's 2 of them. Is this 2-page one, or no, it's not 2 pages, 3-page one. The last page is blank. So this one, functions of the brain. Is it really 11 pages long? It might be. All right, you're right, it's 18 pages long. Didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah, it's pretty intensive too.
Well, I'm just gonna sit here. If you have questions, give them to me. So for this activity 4, name and describe the 4 major regions. These ones right here. Mom, I'm turning it up just a little bit because it says it's 73, but it doesn't feel 73. I'm turning it up a little bit because it says it's 73, but it doesn't feel 73. And then keep putting my coat off and on. Two of them are. Leo, do you want to eat, buddy? No, well, he was begging me earlier. Do you want to eat? They're working on the worksheet and I said they don't want to be put in breakout rooms, and I said, well, I'm here. So put it on yellow. I don't know. They can yell at me, yes, they can yell at me. They're good for students. Hey, Mr. Evans, come here, buddy. Can you come to the bathroom? Did you hear what they were saying about their cat?
All right, guys. Have a good day. I'm gonna have to split.
All right. Yes, have a good one.
Wish us luck.
You too. See ya.
I know I'm here. I'm feeding my special needs cat that I was telling you about. I'm still here.
Professor.
Yeah.
So this is my last day in class with you guys until I think the day before our Thanksgiving break.
Okay.
I don't know. It's like the 23rd or something.
All right. I will make sure I post the videos.
Okay.
So plan on chapter 11, and we will probably do chapter 11 until you get back because it's a longer chapter.
Okay.
And she may have responded to my email at this point, but I think I'm going to, with the special senses, I think I'm going to try to focus it back to the cranial nerves.
Okay.
Because all of our, a lot of our cranial nerves are involved in our special senses. For example, sight. It's not so much a sense, but it's also an oculomotor. So I'll try to keep all that involved. Taste. And how it's, and I will put out a case study, but I'm gonna try to find a case study. Let me see if I can find one that has to do with concussions and cranial nerves. Because I think that would be an interesting one.
So concussions and cranial nerves. Okay.
I'm using you as a sounding board there because it'll depend on what I can find.
I wonder if a stroke would give you a broader
stroke. I know there's one through.
Let's see, concussion, nerve case study.
Well, I know that Connect has that are with regards to strokes, but I thought it was almost too complicated when I looked at it.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't want to go that extreme. Here, let me see here.
Because I feel like you're just gonna get the same symptoms for concussion. I don't know. It's usually just like weakness or memory.
But you know what? Sometimes I don't. You might know that better than I do because I think you've dealt with more head traumas than I have.
Yeah, we see it a lot of it because like with the helmets, they stop bullets, but in like motor vehicle accidents, MVAs, it's really bad because the helmet basically just is another surface for your head to be bouncing back and forth kind of thing.
Ouch. Wow.
Yeah, it cumbers it even worse.
Ouch.
Yeah.
I don't know how you deal with that kind of stuff. I can handle cadavers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the blood of nursing.
See, it's not blood. The only thing that really gets me is trach care.
What's that?
Trach care is like when they have the airway in their trachea.
So doing a tracheostomy?
So we don't do that, but like that stays in there. So then it has to be cared for. And it's not always pleasant because you have to go in there and suction and they tend to cough. So then there's like stuff coming out as you're trying to clean it. And then I've had residents, they're not supposed to eat. They're supposed to be NPO and have a peg tube until they get more control.
Yeah.
And I've had patients not abide by that, and there would be like food and
oh wow.
Oh yeah.
Oh. Ooh. Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I'm sure you've had those dinners where you're like, why are we talking about this?
I know. I don't. You know what? I actually like hearing about it to a certain level. I don't like seeing it. I was the one who fainted in driver's ed. I don't like seeing it because that's just nasty. But I like hearing about them.
I found one. I put it in the chat. It's post concussion syndrome.
Really?
Yeah.
Let me look at it. Or how do I get into our chat? Let me see. Chat.
I don't know if that's too much. It seems like almost a nursing assignment because there's flexion, extension, and rotation. I don't know if we really went over all that.
We will a little bit.
Because that's part of the head injuries too, is sometimes they're decorticate and corticate and all that stuff.
Meaning the spinal tracts are affected?
Yeah, so like they'll be presenting different ways depending where it's injured.
Let me just look at it. Because I'm wondering, could we dumb it down a little bit. You know, make it simplify it down. Evaluation. Cognitive screening, neurological screening. Delayed recall decision making. Nystagmus. Positive Romberg test. I don't know.
Yeah, it looks kind of extensive.
Because we don't talk about a lot of these.
And we also call them TBIs.
Traumatic brain injuries.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing as a post-concussion?
I think that's any kind of, it's an umbrella kind of.
Oh, really? I see.
Yeah, traumatic. Like I think like heart attacks are even called, you know, something else. You know what I mean? Like in like stroke is a cerebral something.
Or
yeah, vascular attack. Yeah.
I always think when I think of strokes, myocardial infarction. Yes. So
yes.
There's two different types of strokes. You can have an occlusive one, or you can have a hemorrhagic one.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be too extensive because we just don't talk about these tests.
Yeah, because like we even use the glaucoma scale and stuff for this, and so.
I am curious. Is it unstable?
Professor, I'm gonna bail on you. I'm gonna go get a free meal.
We'll get a free meal. I will. Yeah, I'll come up with one.
Okay. If I get bored or something while we're sitting doing jack all, you know how the army goes, I'll Google some too.
Okay, do that. Do that.
All right.
Be safe, okay?
All right. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Emily, are you still there? Emily, are you still there? Okay. Just focus on one special sense. All right. That helps.